The question today is evolution of workspaces, especially when it comes to mental health, and how we can actually more integrate a more holistic well-being approach into this. And not only well-being when it comes to individuals, but also environmental impact, because it's not only about us, it's also about the planet, and we're an ecosystem, we're a part of it. So if the environment feels like crap, no surprise that some of us might feel like crap. It's only natural. So yeah, or some of us like me are just neurotic to begin with. So hey, so as I mentioned, it's a partnership between Reshape and Headrock. And I would very much advise anybody on this call, if there is a chance to make partnerships for knowledge sharing, I'd actively encourage to do so. Because even in the world of psychology, funnily enough, occupational psychologists don't often talk to clinical psychologists, not to mention HR and L&D, and then we wonder why nobody gets how great our ideas are. Well, we're trying to kind of show that by cooperation, we'll get further along. And we have our two speakers, Kiran and Ellen. And you can introduce yourself better than I can, because I think I spoke for long enough. So Kiran, if you'd like to introduce yourself first.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kiran, and I'm an organizational psychologist. I work as a consultant in Turner and Townsend, and I like applying psychology in business to induce some sort of change, and particular parts of the business that interest me naturally tend to be safety, health, and environment. So when I'll be speaking to you today, it will be more about behaviours and the environment. And that's me.
So environmental safety psychology, an interesting interaction.
I won't go too much into the psychology behind it, but yeah, I feel it's an interesting subject. Once you get into it, I think it's really good. And organisations are missing the trick. They put all these robust procedures and processes in place, and they don't really consider people.
Yeah, and then people don't follow them.
No, and that's the reason why people don't follow them, because some of the processes and procedures that they've got in place aren't fit for purpose in the first place.
Yeah, I love it how people say, you know, our people are our greatest asset, but we need to protect ourselves from them as well. That's always an interesting one. And I wonder when generations will look back on the current moment and what we do to our environment, and they will think of our behaviors and environment as a major human factors error.
Yeah, they will be. It will be in their essays, I'm telling you. When they're studying psychology, will be those people they'll be talking about and where we went wrong.
Well, hopefully we'll have a chance to go right as well. But thank you so much, Kiran. I look forward to hearing your presentation. Perfect. So now we'd like to know something about you good people. So if you can go to menti.com and type in 40 33 92 3, that number again is 40 33 92 3, and just type in what brought you here today. Sharing knowledge, fabulous first step. Forgot the picture of a little Labrador. It's always really funny how often people who are highly introverted describe extroverts as Labradors, but that's a different story. But talking about curiosity, perfect. And if you just mind unmuting yourself and sharing with us what brought you here today. Anyone? We already heard from Sarah.
I think for me, obviously being a speaker, I've been asked to speak. I think for me, with these sorts of sessions are really useful, as I've worked in mental health for the past couple of years, but I haven't worked in this sort of environment before, certainly within HR. So for me, kind of starting out in this role, it's really useful to speak to other professionals, speak to psychologists, other HR professionals, to understand what the world is currently like in various processes. Certainly when I first started this job and I looked at sort of, corporate wellbeing, the dummies book, because normally that series has something on everything, and it didn't have anything on corporate wellbeing. So for me, as someone starting out in this kind of sector, it's really useful just to hear what experiences people have and what knowledge they have. And like someone mentioned before, it's, you know, we don't know everything, so being able to share is so important. So that's certainly a reason I would be here, even if I wasn't speaking.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Somebody developed a webinar addiction, apparently. Should be a new condition. Jonathan, should we get on to DSM-5, DSM-6, webinar addiction? Symptoms include compulsive Zoom sessions. What stands out for you, Jonathan, from this list?
I think what really stands out for me is maybe just the sort of need and the interest in sharing information and sharing knowledge in this space, and maybe that's a sense, maybe as Ellen was saying, is right now we don't really, there's no textbook, there's no guidebook out there, there's nothing that we can really go to, there's no dummies guide, and everything is new right now. There are no answers to any of this, and we are apparently the experts in this space, and we're all working in our different fields, and we all have our different expertises. So the fact that we can all share this information with each other and share what's been working, and share what our hopes and fears are, concerns, and how we can guide organisations as well, because they often pretend they know what they're doing. Often they don't. We're all in the dark here. So I'm very much interested to really. I'm here to listen. I think lots of people here are as well today.
Perfect. And there is a curiosity and wanting to share. So we're also wondering, how are you feeling today? Just generally speaking. So if you can just type in Menti, what comes to mind? The only thing missing in Menti and Zoom is elevator music. Maybe they can build it in. Anyway, hopeful, depleted, fatigued. Yeah, I can definitely. Third lockdown, 3 is not the magic number in this case. I mean, the third lockdown, I just find completely exhausting. But hopeful, good, sunny, vulnerable. Yeah, I can empathize with that. Driven. And this is what's really interesting, is just the scope of the range of how people are feeling. What's really interesting right now. You know, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times, and sometimes it changes day by day. I read an interesting little meme on LinkedIn that we're all in the same storm but different boats. Some of us in a yacht, some of us in a boat, some of us on a door desperately trying to stay alive. But interestingly, every time I think of a door in the water, I think of the Titanic, but that's a different story, damn it. And but it is that range of emotions. And what has been really kind of surprising is how quickly those emotions change for some people. And this is what has been quite unsettling for quite a few of our clients that we're seeing. And because it just changes from every 15 minutes for some who are not used to that. So that's interesting in itself. Would anybody like to share with us how they're feeling today? Just feel free to unmute.
Maybe, and I just think everyone's feeling a lot worse this time. I think, you know, I mean, obviously time of year, weather, knowing what we've been through already, that we're in the same situation again, lack of end to it this time as well. The promise that we thought that January might be heavy, but February, March would unlock, and for valid reasons. Now, the variants have caused it to be prolonged more than we thought. So there's the fatigue of thinking we've just got to keep pulling it out the bag all the time. Feels to be a strain for more and more people. You know, I think professionally and personally, I felt that amongst people I work with and friends a lot more this time.
Thank you for that, Sue. Yeah, it feels like a slog.
Yeah.
And though we have 15 million vaccinated in UK, I cannot kind of empathize with that number, because it's just like, well, what's next? I'm just curious, Johnson, from a clinical perspective and a therapeutic perspective, what kind of, you know, advice or tips, though you hate those words, I know, What suggestions, recommendations you would have for people who are facing this as a slog?
Yeah, you've most certainly put the question in a way that makes me most uncomfortable. Thank you very much for that, Nikita. Yeah, so I think well, I would always ask people about their support networks initially. So I would ask people if their feelings are, if they are struggling with their feelings, then the first step is to find out what's what they've done in the past about that, what works for them, what has worked for them in the past, and even often when you're really down, you forget all of that. Everything's a deep, dark space, and you forget what you've done in the past that can help you to feel better. And again, that's, I think, some of the questions that we put in today are again looking at that maybe more also from an organisational perspective. What has been working, and what can we take forward from this as well as lessons.
Absolutely, that support structure and asking people for help. I mean, now my favorite question is, how can I help? Whenever I have a call or anything else, opens up the conversation. But we also want to, the last question before we hand over to Kiran is the following. Oh, that's me in third lockdown, but that's a different story. Anyways, keep deviating. What's wrong with me today? Actually, it's in line with my personality. But how optimistic are you feeling at this time? So if you can just click on Menti. And hopefully it should work. Will it work?
There wasn't a scale, there was just a submit button.
Yeah. It was going so smoothly. 1 sec. Let me just correct this. While we pause for technical difficulties. Yeah. Fine. We can do it as a ranking. Well, scales vary, should work, but it doesn't. Mystery. Anyways, let's skip this question from Menti, but would anybody like to share with us how optimistic are they feeling? We can just have a representative sample of 2. I think that's good enough. So who'd like to go first?
Yeah, I'm feeling all right, I suppose, about the situation. Relatively optimistic. I think the fact that a lot of us are lucky to be able to work from home despite everything that's going on, I think that's a really good reason to be optimistic, despite some people feeling depleted or exhausted. But the fact that we can all be here to share what we want to share and then do other things, I think we're quite lucky in that sense. And that's what's driving my optimism for the future.
I think what's interesting, you can be pessimistic and optimistic at the same time. That's why I like working with Jonathan on creating items, because my response would be pessimistic to optimistic, but actually you can be non and optimistic, and you can also be pessimistic. And so though I am anxious, angry, slightly depressed, but I'm also optimistic because of the jabs and vaccines, and for how long can this continue? Thank you, Kiran. Would anybody else like to chime in? How are they feeling?
No, I'd just like to point out that that item there, that question was something that came from me at the beginning when we were thinking about what we wanted to ask people. And actually looking at the first question was, where are people at the moment? I must admit that I feel a bit bad about adding that item now, because it's very, very, there's a whole bunch of assumptions there in that question, essentially. Anyway, that's my point. Yeah, I think I made it.
Yes, well, thank you for telling us that maybe your thought pattern sabotaged Mentimeter. Maybe Jonathan has telepathic ability and that's why the question didn't work. But anyways, there could be all sorts of reasons. about the quantum entanglement of the universe. And on that note, over to Kiran, who will be sharing with us the fantastic research and one of the things people are not talking about when working from home. And that is actually what is our environmental impact of working from home. So Kiran, over to you. You should now be able to share your screen, and I replace Spotlight.
Okay. Just bear with.
By the way, the lighting I love in your room. You look like a deity, you know, with all this light around you. Most people are like in the shadows, but it's like light from every corner.
Honestly, it's just a white room. It has no art or anything in there. Pretty depressing, really, but it's fine. Can you see my screen?
Not as yet, but oh, wait.
Okay.
Perfect. And we can see a little logo of the BPS and the DOP. God bless it.
Can you see this?
Perfect.
Okay, so just thinking. That's better, isn't it?
Oh,
yeah.
Perfection. Thank you.
Oh, good. Okay. Yeah, that's the DOP logo. So this presentation was originally given at the DOP conference this year. And I didn't want you guys to miss out. So we're doing it again now. Okay, so working from home, how important is the carbon footprint of your new workplace? COVID-19 has had an unprecedented effect on us, and the scale of the effects have been catastrophic. Everything has been affected, including our people, our economy, and our environment. So over the next 19 minutes or so, I will talk about carbon footprint and name some of the reasons why carbon footprint is important to us as people and organisations in general and those working from home. I'll talk about the benefits and concerns of working at home and how that has impacted carbon emissions and green behaviours. I'll also talk about, I'll also question whether our individual behaviours can really make a difference to our carbon footprint. And what can we do to keep our greenification going? And finish off with what strategies organisations can use to become more green conscious for those working from home. So what is carbon footprint? So carbon footprint has been talked about for a long time, but what does it really mean? The carbon footprint is the amount of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere as a result of the activities of an individual, an organisation, community, and product. So it's the amount of CO2 that's released, resulted from our activities. Why do organisations measure it then? Yes, it's the right thing to do, and not just because the CEO cares about the environment, but there are other reasons why organisations measure emissions. And one of them is measuring and reporting carbon emissions helps to identify excessive energy usage or other inefficiencies. And lowering emissions typically goes hand in hand with increasing efficiency and cost effectiveness in a company's processes. So for example, Walmart identified through its emission monitoring that they spend a lot of money and energy in the heating and cooling of their buildings. So they installed 10,000 high efficiency rooftop heating and cooling off units. That was great because the units avoided 614 tons of carbon dioxide per year, but it also led to 8 million euros in cost savings. Another reason is that companies have to pay carbon emissions tax. So more and more companies have to pay a price for every ton of CO2 they emit. So it's in the best interest of the company to reduce emissions. Monitoring and lowering carbon emissions is not only becoming an obligation, but a business opportunity to get ahead of the competitors to demonstrate sustainability. So it's good for people's brand image, but the organization's corporate image itself. Plus, there's been a client demand as well. So a sustainability survey showed that 54% of global consumers believe that ethical purchase decisions make a huge difference. So clients are now looking for ways to lower their individual and collective footprint. They want to minimize waste, and they want to buy smart green products and get services from environmentally friendly companies. Why should we care about it? We all have a part to play in reducing emissions and protecting our planet. Why would you not care? Why would you not want to breathe in clean air? It all goes back to fossil fuels. Most of our daily activities involve using fossil fuels, like using electricity, driving, and disposing waste. So what's the big deal? Well, these carbon emissions add up, and the impact is super negative and leads to climate change, impacting our world now and for future generations. Okay, so what's this got to do with working at home? Well, working at home has created a stir where people are celebrating reducing their carbon footprint. WSP is one of the world's leading professional services firms, and they conducted research into working at home last year. And the research by WSP found that office working in winter and home working in summer can lead to an overall reduction in carbon emissions. So it's got great seasonal benefits. So WSP's calculations show that working from home in winter rather than the office in summer saves around 400 carbon emissions. So 400 kilograms of carbon emissions. And that's the equivalent of 5% of a typical British commuter's annual carbon footprint. Home working staff cut their carbon emission from their commute, which would otherwise be more than their home's energy consumption. But put it this way, if the average office worker worked at home all year round, they'd produce 2.5 tons of carbon per year. That's 80% more than a normal office worker. Because working from home in the winter means most heating systems in Britain heat the whole house, producing far more carbon emissions than that would be produced on the commute. The research suggests that we're better off going into the office rather than working from home. There's also been other benefits as well as concerns because of working from home. So CBI conducted research specifically looking into remote working, and some of the benefits of working from home were that, one, the employees liked being able to work from home and having that choice. They felt there was less time wasted on commuting, so more time was spent on being productive, and productivity was improved or it was maintained. Organisations loved the idea of having a home working culture because they knew they could recruit from wider geographical areas. So somebody working up in Carlisle could have a job with a company who's based in London simply because they didn't have to travel down all the time. Work could be conducted from their laptop at home. And remote working also led to a more structured and disciplined approach to communications. There were concerns as well, and a lot of it was around mental health and how people were feeling very isolated. There was blurred home and work boundaries. There was a lack in face-to-face interaction, and that random spontaneity around conversations, where all good ideas come from. And there was worries around burnout and virtual fatigue. And the other major concern for organisations was that training for new starters then was limited to online training as opposed to real interactive on-the-job experiential learning. And that could have a huge impact on building relationships with others, especially if they're consultants like myself. So how has that impacted our carbon emissions and green behaviours? Can our individual behaviours then really make a difference to our carbon footprint? Yes, they can. So what can we do to keep our greenification going for us and our organisations? So tackling climate change isn't something that can be done on our own. We all need to play a part in reducing the impact on our planet. And the best way is to consider everyday carbon emissions. Put it this way, almost everything we do releases some carbon, but how much of that depends on several factors. So we can control our footprint choices every day. We just need to be aware of what we're doing. So the first step to reducing carbon footprint is working it out, and that can be done using online energy calculators. A lot of the energy companies will have it on their websites, and you can they able you to calculate your own footprint, and that way when you know where your footprint is, you can go ahead and control it as well. And there are lots of things that can make up our carbon footprint, and that includes our home and energy, transport, travel, and even IT. So for example, our homes use electricity created by fossil fuels, and how often one drives a petrol or diesel car, or flying for work, or even sending an email. According to the Committee on Climate Change, the average household produces 8 tons of CO2 emissions per year, and around 2 tons of these come from heating your home, with a further 1.25 tons through using electricity. The Committee on Climate Change found that 40% of UK emissions come from our own households. So why do we care? Well, we should, if most of us are working from home since March last year. It also means that our new place of work has a part to play in reducing these emissions. So how can we do this? Well, let's look at heating. 1 in 20 homes with a gas boiler could connect to a heat network, and you could save around 2 tons of CO2 per year. 1 in 3 homes using electric heating could switch to a heat pump, saving 3.2 tons per year. The only issue is that it's not cheap and not a lot of people know how to use it. Electricity. Low carbon generation could reduce emissions by 79%, around 1.25 tons of CO2 per year for the average home. So you could use smarter appliances, less kit, or if you do have kit, you're looking after it, maintaining it, keeping it for longer, and heating your homes efficiently and having more insulation. Transport. And since COVID, using transport like a personal car has risen, but by using a more efficient petrol or diesel car could save you around 0.9 tons a year. A fully electric car could save 2 tons a year. What's better is not to drive or just to walk. Waste. By reducing and sorting waste, emissions from the average home could fall by about 0.25 tons a year. Switching things off when not using them, that could also save you some carbon, and not leaving things on standby. And cutting down on streaming videos online could also save some money on your bills too. So what can organisations do? If they haven't already started, they should monitor and track carbon emissions. It's good for the planet and it's great for business. They could develop an integrated solution to reduce environmental footprint and build a truly sustainable culture. How? Well, first, by understanding your emissions dashboard and really understand where your footprint comes from. And then next, set the priorities. Implement an environmental strategy, and that includes carbon monitoring, and then write a plan to reduce your emissions. And those emissions could be reduced through increased efficiency, increased efficiency, eliminations, and controlling high-risk emissions. Reducing the need to travel into office, or even working with supply chains that are also working towards reducing their carbon emissions by offsetting their carbon footprint. So this is just more than just recycling and planting trees. This is about contributing to developing sustainable solutions in communities and creating roles in rural areas to deliver clean energy solutions for years to come. Organisations could also foster an organisational culture where pro-environmental behaviours are aligned with the environmental strategy. They should encourage green conversations, bring talking about the environment to the conscious with staff, supply chain and clients. They should normalise it so people can strive for higher standards. So yes, our behaviours matter. Carbon emissions are super important in our new place of work, at home. And yes, we can make a difference together. How? Well, one, be mindful and aware of carbon emissions. Know what they are, calculate it, and then control that. Make smart and efficient choices. Use smarter appliances and use smart meters to monitor your own carbon footprint. Calculate it using the online energy calculators. As simple as that. Just because you're not traveling doesn't mean you've reduced carbon footprint. It just means you've used it elsewhere, like heating your homes, driving, or cooking. Organisations can work smartly to deliver sustainable solutions. They can hire staff that align to the environment strategy. That's assuming there is one in place. And if there isn't, then question why there isn't one in place. Management fostering an organisational culture that is pro-environmental, they can reinforce this through leadership behaviours that promote green conscious behaviours. The more that this is brought to everyone's attention, the more likely it will be taken seriously. Thank you for listening, everyone. Do we have any questions?
First of all, thank you so much, Kiran, for that. So as far as I get it, the main thing is work from the office in the winter and work from home in the summer.
Damn right.
So I'm not going to get air conditioning anywhere. Brilliant. But it is for the good of the planet. One of the things that was encouraging to see is just that how much difference one can make.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, I'm actually encouraged by the phenomenon of how cultural norms have changed during the pandemic. So for example, before a year ago, well, a bit more than a year now, if you saw somebody disinfect their hands, stay away 2 meters from other people, and wear 2 face masks on their way to Waitrose, you'd think they're a bit OCD, let's be honest. But now you're just thinking, that's perfectly normal. If a person is not wearing a face mask and going to Waitrose, we treat them as a threat to society and the fabric of our nation. So this has changed so quickly. And actually, what this encourages me that if our cultural norms change about green behavior, that it's not a nice to have, but a must have, we can change our behavior so quickly as a species.
If we're all doing it together, that change comes about quickly. And what we need to understand is that the current changes that have come about was due to a sense of urgency. And that was created by people in power at the same time. So you do need leadership at the top advocating for the change and creating that sense of urgency, and then showing you that data to back up what they're saying, and then reinforcing all of the changes that they're going to make. I mean, it's a classic change program. what's happened over the last year or so. But what's impacted is the environment at the same time, and it's been crazy.
I know,
Yeah.
right?
It really has. I mean, yeah, the air is cleaner, which is great because we're not going anywhere, but it's reduced waste elsewhere. No, it's produced waste elsewhere. It's increased it big time.
And
I
now,
mean, I didn't mention PPE in that presentation, but the amount of wasted PPE, which is crazy, not like it's biodegradable, some of it goes into the sea later and the animals pay for it.
yeah.
So, but we can make a difference. One, because it costs us at home to heat our homes and everything. But if we're more mindful of how we go about using our carbon emissions at home, we can do so much more about it and reduce it at the same time.
Absolutely. So I'm just kind of curious just to hear on Mentimeter, what can you do to reduce your footprint while working from home? I mean, we had the solutions like which were very pragmatic, but there was some really out there, Kiran, like reduce Netflix watching. I mean, look, don't take my Netflix, man. I mean, I have very few pleasures in life. And
there was a lecturer who told me about that. A lot of our emissions do come from streaming and just leaving things on standby. And I discovered at home that our TV's left on standby overnight. And I was like, couldn't believe it. So then what you can do is switch everything off at night and then see how much you save over a course of time. You can check it out on your smart meters, see how much you're emitting.
Exactly. So there's a lot of interesting places that you can look and almost gamify it, how much you can save. Like to me, it was a big thing switching to Oddbox. They're not sponsoring this, sadly, should have asked them. But they basically collect all this kind of vegetables and fruits that will be thrown away.
Yeah.
And they package them with minimal amount of plastic and you just get a cardboard box once a week. And you get like really weird shaped cucumbers and stuff like that. So if you have a kid, it's brilliant. You like open the box, you don't know what's in it. And you go, I didn't know a zucchini could bend that way. And then you have all sorts of vegetables you need to either put in the compost or learn actually how to cook, which can be quite a challenge. But there's little things like this. You can reduce your plastic and take your take your canvas bags to the supermarket. Seriously, people. Or your bag for life, which actually breaks after 10 trips. Anyways, but thank you so much, Kiran. Any questions for Kiran before we move on to the next part?
Good. That's good. Hopefully nobody thinks.
Sorry, if no one else is asking, I noticed maybe in the some of the suggestions for what organisations can do, and given that I've sort of immersed in the world of looking at and suggesting and recommendations of where organisations can go in relation to mental well-being. I was wondering whether you saw any sort of connections or links across those two strategies, because some of them to me sounded in terms of wording as quite similar, particularly in terms of maybe employee responsibility and asking people for them to take their opinions as well.
Yeah, I mean, there are similarities in there. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's the principles are the same to me. I mean, for what we apply for well-being should be applied in other areas of the business as well. You'll find it's pretty similar.
I'm also kind of noticing a pattern between, let's say, increased levels of neuroticism and mental health, and partly to what extent it's connected, that we do realize that our current way of life is not sustainable.
No,
And
really.
you know, it's normal that people, you know, you're destroying your environment for the future generations. It's normal to feel neurotic as a response to that. So I think the moment we start doing better, we'll start feeling better. Well, at least that's what I keep telling myself.
Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, what's the worst case scenario? Air gets better, water gets cleaner. You know, it's like
Brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. It's little things like that that go a long way. But thank you so much, Kiran, and thank you so much for the ideas. Interestingly, only 3 of you participated, which is about 10%. About what you can do differently.
And that tells us a lot there anyway. So not a lot of people know how to go about reducing their carbon footprint. I didn't. I had to look into it.
Yes, and also maybe gamify it, how much you can actually reduce it by.
Exactly.
Perfect. So now we're going to come to the subject of well-being. So now, if you can go into menti.com and type in the code 403392 that number again is 403392 and just type in what you feel organizations have been doing to take care of the well-being of their colleagues. Have you heard of anything? Like, you know, did they subscribe to an app on meditation? And then if their people had trouble sleeping because of the app, they applied for a different app that helps them sleeping, or anything like that, or EAPs, anything that you've been hearing. Well-being Wednesdays, nice. Both start with a W, I like it. And ask colleagues their top 3 priorities for the next few months a year. 3 courses, yoga, new partnership, mindful Mondays. So you have well-being Wednesdays and mindful Mondays. Nice. Would we also have Freaky Fridays? So that's different. Toolbox of mental health, lots and lots of webinars. And then if you have an issue with that, you have an app, which is also good. Team building and team days, perfect. Encourage and take an annual leave, check-in Tuesdays. Team lunches with team members, being given a voucher by the employer to order food from Deliveroo, nice. A little bit of hedonism can go a long way, by the way. Hedonism is definitely an unrepresented part of well-being. Pet hampers, nice. There's a lot of other things. Would anybody like to unmute and share with us what they have heard?
Hi, Nikita, it's Chris. I wrote the one about the team lunches because I have a client. They became aware very early on in the first lockdown that some of the people that worked for them, for example, shared a house and only had their only personal space was their room, which they were concerned about. So one of the things they started doing was they organized a team lunch every week, and they do it on Zoom, and they basically order food for their employees. There's about 12 of them, and they order the food for them up to a limit. I think it's about £7 or £8 or something, and then they all get together and have a team lunch. And they do it every week, and it's worked really well for them.
That's excellent. And
so just a question, the pet hampers, that's not hampers with pets in them, is it? Because that would be unkind.
I can speak to that. That was my contribution. It was to acknowledge that a number of people had got new pets during lockdown, so they sent provisions for the pets and sort of a, you know, instead of, you know, hampers for babies, people got pet presents, which I thought was a nice touch.
Nice.
One other idea that has been given to me is one large team shared the postcodes of the team members. They were sort of spread throughout the UK, and they shared the postcodes to encourage people to, you know, go for walks together if that was possible under the rules. That was just something that people did, which went down well.